So independent analyst Khaya Sithole joins us for more on today's arguments. Khaya, it's been 8 years of litigation where this issue is concerned, and I wonder if this particular moment of the Competition Commission having the matter set before the Constitutional Court is pivotal, and perhaps one that will give us some answers, particularly on this somewhat jarring issue of jurisdiction, which you make of the significance of being in the ConCourt.
So it's actually been a 10-year process, because it was in 2015 where the Competition Commission came out and said they're building a case against banks that were participating in what they now refer to as a single overarching conspiracy against the rand. So just to clarify, what happened is that we had a process beforehand, which was a process of international banks in particular having manipulated the interest rate that banks used to engage with each other. So that was referred to as a LIBOR scandal, LIBOR being the London International Bank overnight rate. And it was in the process of trying to understand what had happened there that the authorities then stumbled upon a new issue, which was the question of how particular traders and dealers representing the banks were then engaging in conversations about the prices at which they wanted to exchange currency. And it was in the aftermath of that where it became clear that there was actually a new problem relating to how these particular traders and dealers decide on what the prices they are going to get quoted in the market for the sale and the buying of currency. And one of the currencies that was affected was the rand. So in the aftermath of having discovered that, the Competition Commission then said, we think we've got a case against the 28 banks that are part of these particular platforms where currency exchange information is indeed disseminated. And also the rand was a currency that these banks were talking about. So of the 28 banks, there are three categories. So you've got banks that are international banks that have no footprint whatsoever in South Africa. So that's category one. Okay. You've got category two banks, which are international banks that have some South African presence or some South African footprint, whether it's in the form of a satellite office or another. And then you've got a third category, which are South African banks that are also actively engaged in these particular platforms. So what has happened is that since the Competition Commission said that we've got a case against the 28, it has been those international banks without a South African footprint that have said, wait, hold on, you have absolutely no authority, you have no jurisdiction over us whatsoever. The other banks that have some element of a footprint in South Africa, either because they're international banks that have some operations in South Africa, or they are South African banks, then have a different argument altogether. So the crux of the jurisdiction argument is the argument that is being proposed by those banks that say that we don't even operate in South Africa. How did they become entangled in this case? Well, it turns out that in the international currency trading market, there are only a few platforms where currency dealers representing all the banks across the world tend to engage, and the Bloomberg terminal is one of the ones that they use. So it will turn out that regardless of where the bank is located, where the trader is located, if they say that, look, I need to know what the price is for rands to be bought and sold, I need to go into this platform, and then I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to get the answer. So it is those banks that say, wait, hold on, South African authorities have no jurisdiction whatsoever over us because we have no presence in that market. All we did was simply ask the question, what is the exchange rate in relation to that currency at a point in time where we were contemplating getting into transactions.
Yeah, I suppose, and this is where it starts to get a little bit blurry, because then the question becomes what institutions we look at. Obviously, the Competition Commission taking it upon themselves and seeing the importance of going to ConCourt, but what institutional infrastructure we do have in South Africa to protect the price at which the rand is traded at the moment in the country, and how we go about developing that institutional infrastructure?
Well, the problem with this case is a case that it starts back in 2007. So when I went and traced the history of the conversations and the chat rooms that existed then, the first one that we saw was actually a chat room where the most compromising conversations happened in January 2008, just after the Polokwane conference. And the relevance of that is that obviously when you have all of these long-standing chat rooms that have been put in place, what has happened here is that until the competition authorities say that, look, within these chat rooms, we think there is some element of collusive conduct, none of these things were regarded as an issue. So you have a system that says that, look, we understand that our currency is one of the top 25 actively traded currencies across the world. We understand that international role players have a material interest in the value of the currency because they want to buy and sell that currency. So that's not the issue here. The issue here seems to be whether in the determination of what the price is needed to be on a day-to-day basis, individuals were colluding and then saying that, look, want to push it in a particular way or in a particular direction, because if that is what was happening, then that is collusive conduct. And the key issue is that obviously if you engage in collusive conduct or cartel conduct, the Competition Commission has the responsibility, it has the duty to then intervene and interrogate the case. And if it feels that a case has been made for prosecution, to then elevate it. So that is clearly what we have seen here. But the problem is now that because there are so many banks involved, and their categorization of 3 banks that are made, what has turned out to be the issue is that some banks have simply said that all we're going to argue is that there's no jurisdiction to begin with, so therefore we don't need to argue the merits of the case. And that is essentially the first part of the case. And then even with the banks where the jurisdiction is not in dispute, so if you think of banks like Standard Bank or Absa, the issue there seems to be, well, the way you've put together your case is that you are making an accusation, which is what the Competition Commission has done, to say that all of these banks were involved in a conspiracy. So if you are arguing that you're involved in a conspiracy, talk us through when we got involved in a conspiracy, when we started participating, and when did we stop our participation. So when we get to the end of these conversations, you're going to see that particular argument emerging from some of the banks that said, look, we are not here to argue jurisdiction. We are South African entities. We agree that jurisdiction applies to us, but we're simply saying that the case that has been put in front of us is not winnable, it's not tenable. So that's why it's actually a 4-day hearing, because there's actually these multiple dimensions that the ConCourt is being asked to explore and then make a ruling on.
Yeah, just before I let you go, I mean, any sort of optimism that the Competition Commission could be successful?
Very difficult. So I went through the 45 affidavits that have been put together by the Competition Commission and the banks, and it does seem that there is indeed a reality that the Competition Commission, in framing its case, was given multiple bites at the cherry. So even at the lower levels, at the Competition Tribunal phase, they were told that, look, we're here what you're trying to allege, but the case that you're putting together is not cogent. So they were actually given, I think, 3 opportunities to actually put together a case. And even after multiple opportunities, that level of jurisdiction said, well, of evaluation said, actually, you don't have a winnable case here. So the Competition Commission has lost on the basis that the way they've decided to package the case under the idea of a single overarching conspiracy is, for me, the fatal flaw in that. But of course, there's also the banks that have said that we don't even need to entertain what it is that you're alleging against us. You simply have no jurisdiction. Yeah. So unfortunately, the prospects of the Competition Commission hinge on whether the Constitutional Court takes the view that, well, we understand that historically the question of jurisdiction has been framed under the question of, well, are you a South African entity? But perhaps in the instance where what you've done as an international role player has an impact on the South African currency and on the South African population, then the question of boundaries being the limitation should be abolished. And of course, if they agree with that, then that's a win for the Competition Commission on the question of jurisdiction. And then there'll be the separate question of the merits of the case. And so far, it looks like the merits of the case themselves are a bit of a tentative. Yeah. I can put it like that.
Yeah, quite the process then ahead of us, Khaya. But thank you so much for breaking much of it down for us. Independent analyst there, Khaya Sithole.